I'm Amy Johnson, and I'm a tutor at Salt Lake Community College, which is in Salt Lake City, Utah. And as a community college, we are an open enrollment institution. So we meet with lots of students that are returning to school after they've been gone for a while. We meet with lots of students that have disabilities, lots of international and refugee students, as well as the more traditional students as well. So that's just a little bit of background. I'm not sure what our statistic is right now of how many ESL students we see, but I love it and I try and do it as much as possible. So about 67% of my sessions I have with ESL students. So today I wanted to talk about canyoneering the cultural divide. The theme of our conference is talking about writers and writers' identities. And I think when it comes to ESL students or ELLs, there can be a big rift between their identity and our identity. Partially cultural from, they come from different countries, perhaps most of our tutors are from the US. And so it can be challenging to kind of navigate these two different types of identities. And I wanted to use this metaphor of canyons. In Utah, we have some great national parks. I think the one that's probably the most well-known is Arches National Park. Has beautiful red rocks and formations. But right down the road, there's another national park called Canyonlands. And I have images of the national park as I'm talking about this to kind of keep in mind that sometimes our students are way on the other side of the canyon from where we are. And so we really need to be cognizant of that and find ways that we can bridge that gap. So I want to begin by talking about what culture is. And this comes from Larry Samover and Richard E. Porter in their article, Understanding Intercultural Communication. And they define culture as the deposit of knowledge, experience, beliefs, values, attitudes, meanings, social hierarchies, religion, notions of time, roles, spatial relations, concepts of the universe, and material objects, and possessions acquired by a group of people in the course of generations through individual and group striving. This is really all-encompassing. This is talking about a lot of different aspects and parts of culture. There's kind of that cliche metaphor about an iceberg, and that culture is really, we only see 10% of it, and there's 90% of culture that we don't necessarily recognize and realize. I took an intercultural communication class a few years ago, and what I thought was interesting in taking that class is oftentimes we aren't aware of our own culture until that comes in conflict with someone else's culture. And then we kind of realize, oh, this is me, this is where I come from, these are my beliefs. And so it's really important that we really consider that when we're meeting with any student, but I think particularly with ESL or ELL writers. There's this fantastic book called ESL Writers, A Guide for Writing Center Tutors. And this edition is the 2004 one, and there has been a later book that's come out and talking about this. And the next several quotes I'm pulling from that book. But Shanti Bruce, she says, the Writing Center has in many ways become a microcosm of U.S. society, an artifact of the culture where values such as education for everyone, punctuality, taking turns, and staying on schedule are enacted every day. And I remember when I read that, it hadn't even occurred to me that even our very institutions and how we work in writing centers is very based in U.S. culture, such as time. I know that it drives me crazy when students show up late to their appointments. That can really throw a kink in things, especially if you're busy and you have a lot of students you need to meet with. But not all students are aware that that is something that we value, not only in the Writing Center, but that's part of our U.S. culture. One of the tutors in our center was invited to attend a Sudanese cultural event. And he said he arrived 15 minutes early and nobody showed up for an hour, not even the organizers. And so in that culture, their notions of time and keeping appointments is different. And so when a student Jennifer Sabin and Catherine Dempsey Nordhaus, they state most writing tasks in U.S. colleges and universities are based on cultural concepts about clear writing and effective argumentation, ideas that may not be shared by ESL writers. U.S. academic texts require students to assume different ways of viewing the world and their place in it. ESL writers, they come from a background of writing. It just might be a different type of background. Here in the U.S., we really value thesis-driven papers. We want your thesis to come at the beginning and the support to come after that. But in other cultures, that is not the way that they write. They may write their thesis at the very end, and the whole paper is building up to that thesis. And so, most of the assignments given, particularly in writing and English classes, are very based on that U.S. mindset of that thesis-driven paper. That's all I want to say about that. So, again, this is Jennifer Sabin and Catherine Dempsey Nordhaus. They propose and they state that contrastive rhetoric studies suggest that not simply